Hello and welcome to the 2023 Agency Pricing Benchmarks. Today has been made possible thanks to the 614 agency owners that took part in BenchPress. BenchPress is the largest survey of UK independent agencies, and the data that we gathered from that survey has allowed us to share the insights that I'll be sharing with you today. A massive thank you to everyone that took part. Today's also brought to you by Wow, an accountancy practice that works with agencies, typically between 8 and 80 staff. And as well as providing accounts for these businesses, we've always been about much more than just crunching the numbers. And as part of that mission to deliver you more value than just number crunching, we provide you with insights and best practice. And we've already shared a load of great insights with you already this year. Earlier on in March, those of you who were able to join us in London and online received the State of the Agency Nation report, where we shared the latest financial performance benchmarks, trends, challenges, and priorities, and how agency owners spend their time. Next month, on the 18th of July, we'll be going into more detail on profit and growth than we ever have done before, looking at the levers that you can pull to increase each of them. And today, I'll be sharing the latest pricing benchmarks. All of this data has been split into two categories. We produce reports for agencies over $1 million and agencies under $1 million, and I'll be sharing stats for both groups here today. Now, in terms of the plan, I'll be looking at four areas and sharing data that looks at pricing methods, the rates agencies are charging, the level of discounting, and some of the nuances around quoting. All of this data has allowed us to do more analysis than ever before. And we've come up with 6 key action areas, which are opportunities for us all to raise our game. Now, I've been in business 19 and a half years, and there is always the next level. There's always something to learn. And for each of these areas, whether this is a new concept to you or one you've heard before, I'd encourage you to think about how you can raise your game and what the next level is for you. I'll be whizzing through a lot of stats today, and I might skim through some that you don't get a chance to scribble down. Don't worry, the recording from today and the full reports with all of the data in will be emailed to you this afternoon. This is an interactive event. As you've seen, we've got people from Australia and France and Dublin and across the UK joining us here today. You're all most welcome. If you have any questions, please post them in the Q&A facility here on Zoom. This is the advantage of turning up live, right? You get to ask questions, and I'll be joined by my colleague Rory Spence afterwards, and we will endeavour to answer as many as we can. So first up, pricing methods. Let's have a look at the different pricing methods used by agencies. So first up, it won't surprise you to know that 4 out of 5 agencies used fixed pricing, which is where a client agrees a scope of work up front, including a fixed fee. Next most popular is time and materials. 58% say they charge for each hour that is worked. 40% use the agile pricing method. So the project is broken down into phases with each one quoted separately. Around about a quarter, 23% price based solely on value to the client. And then we have 7% pricing based on performance. So the fee is paid on achieving a specific outcome. So you only get paid if you achieve a specific outcome, or often it's a case of that's on a scale. So the more of something that you get, the more you get paid. And then finally, licensing. 4% of agencies have actually migrated away from the agency model more towards a software model where they develop software and they price based on usage, often selling licenses for what they do. So that is the landscape when it comes to pricing methods. And later on in this presentation, I will reveal which one is the most profitable. But if you look at all of those pricing methods, there is something that underpins all of them, which is hourly rates, right? Certainly for the first 3, you will be using an hourly rate to calculate your price, whether it's fixed, time and materials, or the agile approach. And even if you're pricing based on value, performance, or licensing, almost certainly you'll be using a notional hourly rate just to check that what you are doing is profitable. Because the beauty about hourly rates is they're kind of like a shorthand for profitability. You know that based on your cost base, if you sell a certain number of hours at a certain rate and have a certain level of utilization, you will achieve the profitability that you want. And we talked back in March about aiming for that 50% gross profit margin, something that a lot of agencies are finding tricky at the moment. So underpinning all of this is an hourly rate, which is why we're also interested to find out what agencies are charging and how that has changed as inflation has risen. So let's find out. What has happened to hourly rates in the past 12 months? Now, we split this into rates charged to new clients and rates charged to existing clients. And there is a difference between these two groups. We also, when we looked at the data, we put it into three categories. So those that haven't increased prices, it's just stayed the same. Those that have increased it by less than the rate of inflation, currently hovering around about 10%, and those that have managed to increase prices by more than the rate of inflation. Let's have a look. The rates charged for new clients, 1 in 5 have not increased rates for new clients in the last 12 months. Given the rate of inflation, I find that quite incredible. And if you are in that 19%, you're going to need to do something about it. We'll come on to what you can do in a second. 45% have increased rates, which is great, but they fail to do it by the rate of inflation, which means that their margin is being squeezed. Only 36% managed to increase their rates by more than the rate of inflation. So these are the ones that are able to charge what they're worth to ensure that their margin remains healthy and to build the foundations for a profitable and sustainable agency. Now, it's a different picture for existing clients. When we look at the rates charged for existing clients and how they've changed, well, 36% felt they were unable to increase rates for their existing clients. And 48% managed to increase them, but not by the rate of inflation, which leaves only 16% actually increasing their rates by more than rate of inflation, which means there's a big chunk of agencies, 84%, are seeing their margins squeezed for existing clients. Think about that for a second. 84% of agencies are seeing their margins squeezed for existing clients. So it's no surprise that the first action area for all of us here today, certainly 84% of us, we need to increase our prices. And not only do we need to increase our prices, but we need to build a process to do this regularly. Looking at the split between existing clients and new clients, it is clear that we all have a challenge increasing rates for existing clients. This is something that we have to find a solution to. Otherwise, our margins will continue to be squeezed year on year, and that profit will just disappear. Now, this is such a big topic, such an important action area that we wanted to do something about it. And again, we'll be running these brilliant agency bite sessions. They're sessions that Rory hosts. And what I love about them is they provide content on a particular subject, in this case, how to increase your rates for existing clients. And then we bring together agency owners in small groups to debate what you've tried, what's worked, what hasn't. But we bring people together to share ideas and experiences to help you leave with a clear action plan to work on this important area. So watch out for those dates. An email will be coming out soon. There'll be 3 dates in the next month or so. Grab one of those and be part of the journey of increasing your prices. It's a never-ending journey, but the key is to build it into your process. Now let's look at average rates. What are agencies actually charging? And when we look at this, we split this into blended and tiered rates. So just a reminder for those who just want to understand the difference between the two. A blended rate is this: you charge the same rate for all members within your team. So you charge £100 an hour, £120 an hour, and you always charge the same rate, regardless of who's doing the work or the type of work that it is. Tiered rates are when you charge different rates based on the level of expertise within your business. You might charge a junior out at 80, a mid-level out at 100, a senior at 120, and maybe directors out at £150 an hour. So blended versus tier rates, we've got data on both of them. And when we look at average blended rates, this is what the data is telling us. Actually, before we do that, let's have a little bit of fun. What do you think the average blended rate is here in the UK? If you go to the chat and just type in an amount, let's see what we're all thinking. Okay, interesting. Look at these numbers. There's a chunk above 100. There's a few beneath 100. but we also, well, the average seems to be heading around 100. Right. Let's have a look at what the data actually tells us, and you can see whether you're right. You can also see whether you're above or below the average. So we've been tracking average blended rates, well, since 2012, but let's from this graph, we're going to look at it from 2020. And in particular, when you think of two things, the backdrop is obviously COVID, and the backdrop is high rates of inflation in this period. So the first thing to say is the average blended rate is different for small and large agencies. So agencies above $1 million in 2020 had an average blended rate of 100, and for agencies under $1 million, it was £80 an hour. That rose to 103 and 86, to 105 and 89. And the current averages for hourly rates for agencies here in the UK are £108 an hour for agencies above $1 million fee income, and £93 an hour for agencies under $1 million fee income. When you look at the percentage increase from 2022 to 2023, it is small, 2.9%. for the larger agencies, 4.5% for the smaller ones. You will notice that both these figures are well beneath the rate of inflation, well beneath the rates of increase that you are paying your staff, and indeed all of your other costs are going up. And therefore, it's no surprise when looking at this data, once again, that margins have been squeezed, the gross profit percentage is down. Here is a huge clue as to why. Let's look at blended rates in more detail. For £1 million plus agencies, it's split into these categories. And you can see this year, for the first time, we started to label some of the charts, so it was really clear how everyone was performing. You're below average. If you have a blended rate of £100 or less, you're below average. Then we've got a chunk sort of sitting between 100 and 115. You're in good hourly rate if you're between 116 and 130. And the top performing agencies, top 11%, are £131 an hour or more. Have a think about where you sit on that chart. For the smaller agencies, very similar picture. The only difference is everything just drops down by £10 an hour. So £90 an hour or less is your below average, and then the top performing is £121 an hour or more. Now, remember those figures: 131 to be top performing for the £1 million plus, £121 an hour for the agencies under $1 million. Let's compare that to tiered rates. Now, 55% of £1 million plus agencies use tiered rates. 32% of agencies under $1 million use tiered rates. This has increased since the last time we completed this study, and I sense that the next time we ask this question, that number will have risen again, especially when you look at what these agencies are charging. So tiered hourly rates for £1 million plus agencies. We split out the data into junior, mid-level, senior, and director, and we looked at both the average hourly rate for each of those and also the top 10%. And the way we calculated the top 10% was we simply listed the rates charged by all respondents, put them in order, and then averaged the top 10% of those rates charged. So of the 614 agencies, we took the top 61, and it was the average of those 61 that got us those figures, just so you know exactly how we calculated it. So the average for juniors was £80. The top 10% were £114 an hour. Mid-level, 102. Top 10%, 148. You can see as we go through, £129 an hour for seniors, the top 10%, 203. Directors are being charged as an average of nearly 170 and 282 for the top 10%. Now you'll notice for £1 million plus agencies, for a blended rate, top 11% were in that 131. By the time we get to mid-level, we're beyond that. We're beyond that 131. And what I think is really interesting is the levels that these agencies are charging when they're using tiered rates. Let's have a look at the smaller agencies. Similar picture, really. Averages ranging from 70 to 146. But look over at the top 10%. They've already smashed through that 121 top performing range pretty much by the time they charging out their junior staff. So everything else beyond that is charged at a higher rate than those using blended rates. So it won't surprise you to know that agencies that use tiered rates, not only do they charge more, but they make more profit. Now, you probably don't need to guess what the next action is, but I'm going to share it with you anyway. The second action here today is to use tiered rates. Now, if you're already using them, terrific. My challenge to you is to think about how you can, whether there's a particular tier that you're maybe undercharging on. By the way, there's detailed analysis on all of the tiers in the report. You can check that out. So if you're already using them, my challenge is for you to think about how you could tweak some of the rates in particular tiers. Maybe there's a level within your business that has had a disproportionately high pay rise in the last 12 months, and you need to adjust the rate accordingly to ensure that you maintain that healthy profit margin. And of course, if you're not using tiered rates, look, there's some significant incentives for you to do so. And if you sat there thinking, well, yeah, it looks a bit complicated. Well, of course, it is more complicated than using a flat rate, but the rewards are worth the effort. And you don't need to go into a 4-tier system straight away. You could even just start off with one premium tiered rate and just have, I understand if you're a small business, you might not have all those tiers, but certainly to have a standard rate and then a premium rate that you can charge yourself at as the director, or maybe some of your senior people at, would be a starting point. And you get the opportunity to unlock some of that profit and take advantage of really the fact that you have additional expertise, you're adding additional value, you should charge for that. So action 2, up your game when it comes to tiered rates. Now, the price that we charge on paper is just one part of it. The price that we end up, the client ends up paying is far more important. And the price that the client ends up paying is obviously heavily influenced by the amount of discounting. So let's explore what agencies are giving away and the impact that this has. So we asked a very simple question. Do you discount without reducing the scope of work? Now, the good news is that 69% say they rarely or never do this, which is great. But 31% are doing this either often or always. And when you look at those two groups, and we look again at the group that never or rarely discount, so agencies that rarely or never discount, well, they hold more cash, they make more profit, and they feel less anxious. Of course they do. They're making more profit, and as a result, they're holding less cash because they're giving away less discount, so they don't feel so anxious right now. And if you needed a bigger incentive to join that group, so that 31% that are currently always and often giving discounts away, how can you move into this other group to ensure you hold more cash, make more profit, and feel less anxious? But let's look at the detail around how much we're giving away, because there will be occasions where it feels like we have no choice and we need to give away discount in order to give the work. So let's look at what level of discount the agencies give away. Well, 1 to 5, well, almost half are giving away up to 5%. But look at these numbers. That means that over half of agencies, 55%, are giving away more than 5%. We've got 10% giving away 11% or more of their profit. Now, just think for a second, right? When you win a piece of work, that joy you feel, and then the hard work that begins. In order to make profit from any job, you have to work incredibly hard. And there are so many ways that profit can leak out in that delivery process. It's hard enough making profit on a job or on a retainer. Why give discount away right at the start? Within these huge chunks that are straight off the bottom line, impact your gross margin significantly. Now, action 3 is to ensure that you have reviewed your discounting strategy. Now, as I said earlier, there are occasions when discounting is inevitable. Negotiating with procurement departments is an inescapable part of working with larger companies, and they will be often seeking discounts. Now, if you find yourself in a situation where you feel like you have no choice but to give a discount, it's important to have a strategy around it. And by the way, be clear on your strategy. What increments are you going to give away? And crucially, what are you going to get back in return? And there are lots of things that you can get back in return for your discounts that actually have quite significant value to you and maybe actually worth giving a discount away for in the first place. So 2 areas to look at: improved commercial terms. So if you're going to give away a discount, well, what do I get back in return? Can I have an increased volume of work, please? So you currently, committed to spending 50 grand. Well, if you move to 100 grand, you'll get this level of discount. What about a higher amount payable upfront? That's another great negotiating point. So We did some research a few years ago that looked at the amount that agencies charge up front. Can we shift that so that 50% of the project, 75, even 100% of the project is paid up front to avoid you having to scrap around towards the end of the project, sending out smaller invoices and waiting for ages for get payments. Now, when it comes to getting paid, how about improved payment terms? If you're negotiating with the procurement department and they want a discount, say, well, hang on a minute, you pay me on 60 days. I have to fund that for 60 days. That costs me money, interest, which are high at the moment. So you can't have it both ways. You can't pay me on 60 days and expect a discount. If you want a discount, how about you pay me within 7 days? And that's another negotiating point that could really help your cash flow. Also, commitment to a longer term contract. Well, how about, rather than this going out for tender every year, you commit to 3 years, then you get a discount. And that gives you the peace of mind and saves you all the effort of retendering each year. Other things you can get in return are marketing opportunities. So perhaps a referral to other parts of the business. So sure, we'll give you this small discount, but we would like you to introduce us to these 5 areas of the business. That could be worth way more than any discount that you're giving away. Perhaps it's introductions to their other connections with partner companies or where they used to work. Maybe it's a recommendation on social media or a video testimonial or a case study that would actually be of value to you. So have a think about what you're giving away. Be careful with percentages. They sound small, 1, 2, 5, 10%. Sounds like small numbers. Think about the actual value that you are giving away. What are you going to get in return? And what's the value exchange? So we're now going to look at the nuances of quoting, how agencies present their quotes and what's included in them, because it's not just about hourly rates. There's some subtleties to this. And one of the subtleties is the ensuring that you know the client's budget before you quote. And we were curious, what percentage of projects do you know the client's budget before you issue a quote? Now, there's clearly advantages to being in the know here, to knowing what your client's budget is. But when we look at the data and we split it down into 20% increments, not enough agencies know their client's budget the majority of the time. Really, you want to be in that top 12% that know it pretty much all the time. Maybe you could argue that being in the next bracket down, so that 22% where you know it maybe more often than not is a reasonable place to be. But there's no excuse for not knowing what your client's budget is before you quote. And Rory wrote a really interesting article on this that's on our website. We linked to it from the report. I'll just let you read that. It's a brilliant way of ensuring that you can be in that top 12% and get your client's budget every time. It really does work. I'll let you read that when the article comes through, when the report comes through. The next area we were curious around the nuances of quoting was to explore how many pricing options you give when presenting a proposal. So I've long been an advocate of sharing more than one pricing option because it gives the client the opportunity to compare your prices, gives you the opportunity to position different options favorably, and avoids the situation where they have to go and get another quote to compare. And yet still we have a third of agencies only giving one pricing option. I've got so many anecdotes over the years of agencies that have moved from 1 to 2 to 3 pricing options and reap the reward. Now, as well as those anecdotes, which you've heard me share before, I now have data to back up that this is a good idea, because when we looked at those who offered 3 pricing options, we discovered that they were twice as likely to have a high conversion rate, so above 60%, and 50% more likely to have a high client value, above £100,000 in year 1. So if you would like a higher number of higher paying clients, this is what you need to do. Action 4, give 3 pricing options. And there's lots of, there's a great blog that we link to in the report that will give you some of the science behind this and some of the methods that will help you to position your prices successfully. There's lots of books that you can read on this as well. But if you are not doing this, and there's a big chunk that aren't, I would encourage you to find a way to incorporate this into more of your quotes. I appreciate that, again, for those that are tendering, this is going to be difficult because you have to kind of answer the tender, but see if you can find ways in some of your other quotes to give 3 pricing options. It has the power to transform not just the value of the clients you pick up, but your likelihood of picking them up as well, as we've seen from the data. Now, next question we asked was, do you charge additional fees for out of scope work? So in the report, we look at how agencies scope their work and whether or not they charge for it. But what was really interesting was what happens after that, because 31% say they rarely or never charge for out of scope work, which means the vast majority do, which is good. They often and always. And what we did was we split the data like this into the two groups, never and rarely, and often and always. And what we looked at for these two groups was their gross profit percentage, because this has been something that's sparked a lot of debate over the years. Which is better? People that say on this first camp, they rarely or never charge extra because they want to keep the client happy. Those on the other side say, well, look, of course we should charge extra. How on earth can we be profitable without it? Well, I'm going to settle this debate once and for all. Gross profit percentage, looking at these two groups, agencies that rarely or never charge extra for out of scope work make 36% gross profit. Agencies that often or always charge make 43% gross profit. There is a clear reason for you to move away from, if you are in that first category where you rarely or never charge extra, to find ways that you can always and often charge extra. In fact, no surprise, this is the fifth action area. We need to all charge for out of scope work. And actually, the process of charging for out of scope work starts not at the point where the work goes out of scope. It starts at the point you engage with the client. So one of the first things that you should do when you pick up a new client is inquire with them, how do you want to handle things when they go out of scope? Because here's the thing, they will go out of scope for one reason or another. They will go out of scope. It might be that the client asks you to do something extra, or takes too long to provide you something, or doesn't give you things in the correct format or on the correct date. It might be that you discover an opportunity to do things better or differently that you want to present to them. But it's unrealistic, I think, for a project of any significant size or complexity, or a retainer over a long period of time, to remain within scope. I think too much changes, right? The world changes, there's people involved, and we should acknowledge the fact that things go out of scope. But the question is, how do we want to handle it? How does the client want to handle it when things go out of scope? And what the client will not say in that moment, calmly at the start of an engagement, is, yeah, I'd like you to do that work for free, please. They're not going to say that. Instead, you can have a conversation around, well, okay, who can sign off the work and what's their budget limits? And maybe even putting in place things like contingency budgets. More and more agencies are putting in place 10, 20% value of the project or retainer as a contingency budget, and say, well, look, we think it's going to be about £100,000 to do this work. We recommend you get budget for 120, and that £20,000 will be contingency that we can draw down on if we need to. We will be really clear about what's out of scope. We'll be really clear about the benefits that bring, and then you can make a decision about whether you want to do it. So I think acknowledging at the outset, coming up with a methodology, making sure that you're really clear in your scope, simple things like how many rounds of amends there are and what happens if we go beyond that, and think about all of the projects that you've done and where are the pain points, where are the things that often go out of scope, and how you can address these right at the outset. I think it's a really smart move, but we've got to find a way to do this better, because that 36% to 43%, there's some significant reasons that it's worth getting this right. So I mentioned right at the start that I was going to share with you all the different pricing methods that agencies charge, and then we were going to reveal which one's the most profitable. So a reminder, here are all the pricing methods, and let's play a little game. Which one do you think is the most profitable? I'm going to launch a poll, and it'd be interesting to get your votes on which pricing method you think is the most profitable. Okay, just going to give you another moment to place your votes. We're nearly there. Okay, all the votes have now been counted and verified, and I can reveal what you think the most profitable result is. So, number one, you think value-based pricing is the most profitable, followed by agile, followed by maybe time and materials, and fixed. Wow. Should we have a look at what the actual answer is? When we look at the data, I can reveal the most profitable pricing method is indeed value-based pricing. You all knew the answer, and yet, why is it that only 23% of you watching this are actually doing this? You all know that this is the key to a profitable and sustainable agency, and yet less than a quarter are actually doing this. And that's because it's hard selling value, rather than time. It's hard to do that. So, but the rewards are significant. Agencies that use value-based pricing are more likely to grow faster, so have an increase in fee income of 26% or more. And they're more likely to make more profit, have a gross profit margin of 50% or above. Action number 6 is one we all need to work on, which is to price on value more often. Now, the fact that you all know the answer but are not doing it tells us that this is tricky. So let's look in detail about how we can actually take the next step on this journey and actually price on value more often. So the first thing that we need to do is to learn or commit to learning about selling value rather than time. You know, this is a science. This is something that there has been lots written about. Two of my favorite books on the subject are written by the same author, Blair Enns. If you read the Win Without Pitching Manifesto and Pricing Creativity and Action, the things he talks about in there, you will be well on your way to pricing based on value rather than time. But there's lots of other material and books and areas that you can learn. But I think a commitment to learning about this is really important. Now, I actually caught up with Blair last week and asked her, I said, look, I'm doing this presentation. I'm going to reference your books. But can you give me one tip, please? Like one quick, succinct tip that I can give to everyone that they can implement right away. And he said, yeah, it's simple. We need to just talk about value more. And I said, all right, explain this in a bit more detail. He said, well, look, often agencies talk about deliverables or talk about time. We're going to deliver you this website. It's going to take this many days. Actually, instead, talk about the value that you're going to add to clients, and also get your team talking about value and understanding that billing equals value. You know, if your agency doesn't bill anything, you've not added any value to clients. The more that you bill, the more value that you've added, and helping the team understand that and understand the importance of generating revenue and understanding that it is a direct measure of the value that you're adding, the impact that you're having, is a good start. Now, to do this, you're going to need to start increasingly focus on outcomes, not deliverables, outcomes. So people say they want a website, but what do they really want? What's that's going to deliver them? What are the outcomes that they're seeking? Really go beyond the obvious and ask more questions as to what the client really, really wants to achieve from this. Start measuring return on investment. Now, not enough agencies do this, but what I'd encourage you to start doing is thinking, well, when you get to the end of the project, first of all, at the start of the project, saying, well, what is it you want from this project? What is the return on investment that you want? And then at the end of the project, you can actually assess how well you've delivered on that. And you shouldn't be afraid of this. You shouldn't be afraid of being proud of the return that you have delivered for that investment. But the key is to start measuring it. And this will require you to go deeper with clients. You know, it will require you to ask more questions, to understand their business in ways that that you don't right now. And I promise you that that journey is worthwhile. What it will help you do is uncover what your clients value most. And this is where it starts to get really interesting, because if you can uncover what it is that clients value most, you can start charging disproportionately highly for that. And right now, I promise you, there is a service that you offer right now that you are undercharging for. Right now, there is something that you do that you could increase the price of significantly that would have no impact on demand or very little impact on demand. I want you to think about what that might be. What is it that you do that your clients perceive as magic? You might not, by the way. You might think that it's the easiest thing in the world for you to do, but that doesn't matter. It's what the client values that matters. What do they value? It might be not what you do, it might be how you do it. It might be the fact that you have a particular level of expertise. But think about it. Right now, there is something that you could increase the price of that would have very little impact on demand. Often, when it comes to selling value rather than time, in order to sell the most value, bigger value, you will need to find bigger clients with bigger budgets. I remember having this conversation probably a decade ago with an agency that genuinely at the time was doing £1,500 websites for local businesses. And it was very difficult for them to add significant value to these small businesses because they were just so small. And they set off on a journey to focus on working with bigger clients with bigger budgets. And what they did was they focused on a particular skill set they had. They focused on internal comms because that was something that they were brilliant at. And it didn't take long for them to pick up brands we all know, bigger clients, bigger budgets. And you think how some of those bigger clients, what £1,500 means to them versus what that £1,500 means to a small business. I'd encourage you all to think bigger when it comes to value. And to go on this journey of being the best in the world. And I make no apologies for yet again bringing this up. And if you've been on my previous webinars and you're thinking, oh, I've heard this before. Well, you may have heard it before, but how are you doing on that journey? If you've read the book Blue Ocean Strategy, it talks about finding a place where no competition exists. And if you are the best in the world, you can charge what you want. If you are a generalist, if you do the same stuff as everyone else, you're going to find it very difficult to charge based on value. You just simply are, because what value additionally adding to the person down the road who does a very similar thing? Where you can narrow your focus by focusing on a particular type of business, so a niche, and narrow your focus by specialism, by what you do. So you do something specialist for a particular group. You have the opportunity to go on this journey to being the best of the world at something. And the more you narrow your focus, the less competition there is. And the less competition there is, the more opportunities you have to charge truly based on value, because you're the only ones to be able to deliver this. And I just encourage you all to just keep thinking about how you can take the next step on this journey. Now, it might be you're right at the start of this journey and you do everything for everyone. Well, how could you just do a little bit less or focus your offering and do it for a particular group? And right now, you probably already have a group of clients that you work with that you could corral together into a niche. How could you focus on that and build on that and start this journey to being the best in the world? And if you're a little bit further down the line, you've been going a few years, those of you remember that maybe who were at the last Agency Bites, the case study Rory shared that really challenged you in terms of what niching looks like. Just think about what the next step on the journey is for you. The rewards are worth it. Ultimately, what this is all about is demonstrating our value. So once we start talking about value and then uncovering it with our clients, building those case studies around return on investment, that gives us the opportunity to clearly demonstrate it. We are the best in the world at this. And here is the evidence. This is how we will add value to your business. All of the time talking about value, all of the time demonstrating value very, very, very clearly through the case studies, through the return on investment analysis that you've done. And all of this will build your confidence. Imagine walking in to a situation with clients and saying, hey, we're the best in the world at this. And here's the proof. Here's how we're going to add loads of value to your business. This is what we're going to charge you. That is the conversation that we all need to be having with clients. Now, I appreciate that there is a journey to go on, but start that journey, do your learning, and commit to going on that journey, because it will lead you to a better place. Now, final point I want to make on this is you will not be able to price every project based on value. Even if you're really good at this, you simply won't be able to, because there'll be certain clients that it won't be appropriate for. There'll be certain procurement processes that simply won't allow you to do this. However, right now, less than a quarter of us are doing this. So we need to raise that bar. And I promise you that the quarter that are doing it are not doing it for every client as well. What we need to do is just find a way to do this more often, just a little more often than we are doing at the moment, and building our confidence and learning and growing in that process. And I promise you, if you do this, if you commit to doing this for the next 12 months, you will be in a much better situation in 12 months' time, and you will see that in the bottom line of your business. So good luck on that journey. Now, your actions from today, there's 6 of them. Increase your prices. This is something that starts now, but it's not just about making this a one-off. It's how you build that into your processes and systems so you can do it regularly. And that's why we're running an agency bite session on how you can do that, particularly with your existing clients. If you're not using tiered rates, well, I shared some very clear data earlier to give you reason to move to tiered rates. If you are using tiered rates, have a think about how you can raise your game in certain areas to make sure you're maintaining your profit margin. It's also important to, well, have a discounting strategy, as we talked about earlier, and to review it, making sure that if you do give something away, you get something in return. Also, and there's a big chunk who aren't giving 3 pricing options. The benefits of giving 3 pricing options are clear, as is charging for out-of-scope work and pricing on value much more often than we're doing at the moment, or at least starting that journey. We can all start that journey. And in terms of that journey, we're with you every step of the way. If your accountant doesn't give you this level of insight, then we would love to chat to you about how we can help you on your journey. Do get in touch.